I'd like to call the meeting to order. The town clerk will now do the roll call. Here. Hey, Jim.
We are happy to welcome back to District 6, replacing Representative Joe Luciano. We have returning member Representative Patty Dyer. Here. David Cullen. Kevin Hopkins. Here. Bill Llewellyn. Here. Tim Lynch. Present. Al Schwartz. Here. Kathy Braun. Here. Liz Hopkins. Here. Larry Kelly. Tom McCarthy. Here. Jim Tommy. Faye Phillips. Here. Sean Fellner. Here. Mark Stacy. Here. Jamie Milliken. Here. Michael Rowley. Chuck Cazarelli. Here. Brian Farnham. Mike Mears. Present. Matt Rapino. Cheryl Wyatt. Here.
I would also like to point out that we have a member of our state delegation here, Representative Tony Wong from the 134th. And we also have Representative Kim Fawcett here, representing the 133rd. I'd like to ask Norma Peterson to come up to the podium, please. As you know, this past December, Norma Peterson was named by the Board of Selectmen as the 2010 Fairfielder of the Year. I'm very happy for her, as she is well deserving of this award, and it is an honor to have her here in front of this body to formally congratulate her. A number of you served with Norma while she was on the RTM representing the 2nd District in 2005-2006. Norma quickly developed a reputation for being a diligent member who always did her research on the issues and was well prepared for debate. She was always prepared, maybe a product of her profession as an attorney, but she was also always thoughtful and grounded in her approach to any issues, a product of her profession as a school teacher. This notion of being prepared came into further form when Norma resigned from the RTM as she was given the opportunity to serve on the Police Commission in 2006, taking over Jackie Durrell's term on that body. Norma was reappointed in 2008 for her own 5-year term and served as the Commission's chairman in 2008 and 2009. In addition to her work on the Police Commission, Norma started the Fairfield Citizen Corps Council in 2004. The Citizen Corps was formed by FEMA after the 9/11 tragedy and was founded on the concept of having citizens available who could force the police, fire, and medical personnel in case of a disaster that was too big for the professionals to handle alone. With her continued philosophy of being prepared, Norma then created the Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, in June 2007, which, among other things, presents education programs to groups to help increase citizen emergency preparedness. The CERT organization, with Norma as chief trainer, now has 40 trained members on the team and is currently training 25 more. CERT training includes medical response for emergencies, disaster psychology, fire safety, and light search and rescue. The CERT team has helped the Red Cross to open 2 shelters recently, one when there were fears of a chemical spill on I-95. Norma has given back to the community in so many other ways as well, serving on the board of directors of Operation Hope, as a PTA volunteer, and as a member of the Fairfield Rotary Club, where she was president in 2009 and 2010. We're so proud to have someone so selfless, forward-thinking, and hardworking in her efforts to strengthen this town and make it more prepared as Norma Peterson. Could you please all stand and give a warm round of applause to Norma Peterson. Thank you, Norma. Norma, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Just a quick thing.
Sure.
Please sit down. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a privilege. I'll be leading the Pledge of Allegiance, and it is a privilege to do that before the RTM, and it's nice to be back here. The other thing is, I did want to thank you for recognizing the importance of citizen emergency preparedness. Now, the moderator had asked me to do a PowerPoint presentation regarding, no, he really didn't, but I do, but I do have some materials on the front table, so should you wish to get some more information about that, please take those when you leave tonight, and also I'd be glad to help you in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. You want to lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We just stay standing for a moment of silence. Real quickly here. In January, this country remembers the life of Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday became a national holiday by an act of Congress in 1983. And we want to take this time, we usually take this time of year to honor his efforts and triumphs in advancing the civil rights movement, as he became one of the greatest social activists the world has ever known. He traveled over 6 million miles and spoke over 2,500 times, appearing whenever there was injustice, protest, and action. He was arrested upwards of 20 times and assaulted at least 4 times in his work as a civil rights leader. As members of the RTM, a body that on a different scale represents the interests of many people, let us take a moment of silence in honor of Dr. King's tenacity and his mark in the world. Thank you. You can be seated. Thank you, Norma. The next item tonight is number 2, which is to hear an address on the state of the town by the First Selectman.
Thank you. Good evening, friends, residents, RTM members, town and state officials. Welcome. Welcome tonight. I'd just like to for a second, though, would like to acknowledge also and wish best the Brown family, Tom and Betsy. As you know, Tom's mom unfortunately passed on, and also would like to offer some thoughts on all of our behalves to former Selectman Carl Dickman and State Rep, who's having some tough issues right now. So our thoughts are for all of them. But good evening. And as many of you know, our national leaders are seeking more civility in Washington after recent tragic events. Here in Fairfield, thankfully, we have always cherished our respect for each other. And this is a good time to pledge anew our bipartisan commitment to lead Fairfield forward in positive and productive ways. I have always done my best to advance a civil and cooperative approach to governance, and this has yielded solid results. We have demonstrated that no matter what our party labels we may hold, the officials of our special town are willing to lead in a caring and competent manner. We have put Fairfield first above partisanship, and I commend the members of this body, the RTM, and the other boards of Finance, TPZ, and our own selectmen, and all town bodies and building committees as well, for working so hard to ensure respect for all our citizens as well as for each other. Each of you deserve the community's deep thanks and gratitude for all you do. And tonight, as most of us think about our goals and aspirations for 2011, I think it is a time to remember as well, to remember the victims of senseless shootings out west, and as well the cherished memories of 2 Fairfield heroes, Kim and Tim Donnelly, lost in a similarly senseless tragedy at the heart of our town. As you know, there's a trial going on right now, and Kim and Tim represented the best values of any community, serving as local business people and caring family stewards. I hope the entire Donnelly family knows that Fairfield is thinking of them. Last week, I had the honor of sitting for an hour with the mayor of Tucson, Arizona, at dinner. And we shared thoughts about the ways in which communities come together to deal with grief. In honor and memory of all victims of violence, I really think tonight I would ask that we stand for a moment and share together a solemn moment of silence for those recently lost and our heroes lost in the past. Thank you. Thank you. And may it never happen again one day. May their good memories always be remembered. And truthfully, I believe the best way to honor memories is to serve the public interest. Caring for the people of Fairfield has been and remains an incredible joy for me. Ever since 1995, when I was first elected as the town selectman, it is such an honor to lead and to accomplish many wondrous things for our town. And we do live in one of the most beautiful, well-managed communities in the nation. We have shouldered our town responsibilities during this daunting recent era of recession and uncertainty, and thankfully, our Fairfield community has been able to maintain and sustain excellence and quality of life. We are promoting the arts and culture. We are enhancing the education of our children and being good caretakers of our environment. I am so pleased that this leadership has been recognized throughout the state, as Fairfield was ranked as the top community in our state by Connecticut Magazine, achieving more points than any other community out of 169. And I've said before many times, everyone in this community deserves credit for helping to create our community's enviable and outstanding record. Recently, in 2010, we've improved town in many significant ways. Stratfield School was expanded. Miles of roads and streets were repaved. New sidewalks installed in priority need areas. And improvements to our building energy systems have cut usage and hundreds of thousands of kilowatt hours, reducing energy costs and lowering emissions. The last fiscal year was completed with the biggest fiscal surplus in recent memory, returning over $2 million to our town's rainy day fund to insulate the town from any future emergencies. We undertook an operations audit which concluded that the town's workforce is very lean and performing at high levels. Fairfield is doing more than many other communities, and we're doing it with fewer governmental employees. Our goal is always to deliver outstanding services for our citizens. The audit shows the town side of the budget really cannot be trimmed much further without sacrificing the quality of services the people in Fairfield expect and deserve. So to sum up our efforts in 2010, I'd like to talk about Fairfield Cares, a wonderful coalition of clergy, community leaders, education officials, and medical leaders. We've just recently completed a survey sent out to all the parents of our middle school and high school children, assessing risky behavior issues facing students. We are in the process of creating a series of programs and initiatives for this new year, which will hopefully have a positive impact both on youth and on families. Recently, former U.S. Cabinet Officer Joe Califano gave a talk to over 200 high school parents discussing ways for people to prevent and reduce risky behavior. Going to the economic development front, tremendous things are happening in our town. Even with this stagnant economy, Fairfield literally has the lowest vacancy rate, commercial vacancy rate in our state. And Fairfield Center and other business districts are thriving like never before. I remember in my first State of the Town speech in 1998, I said, and I quote, "We will implement an economic development strategy and revitalize key economic corridors of our town." Well, the efforts of this last decade have exceeded beyond my most fervent expectations. And in 2010 alone, in this tough time, I cut over a dozen ribbons at stores which have had the optimism to open during these economic times. Think back a decade ago. In 1998, there were literally perhaps a dozen restaurants and arts businesses stretching from Southport to the Bridgeport line. Today, in that same area along Route 1, there are over 60 restaurants and 15 separate performance art establishments, galleries, and dance studios flourishing from Fairfield Center to East Fairfield. While we plan and seek more further improvements along Commerce Drive and Kings Highway East, I am pleased to report that dozens of new businesses, retail stores, and car dealerships have opened, as you know, during this past decade. And now, construction of the Whole Foods Market that I worked with the private owner to bring to Fairfield will soon be complete, and another former factory site, environmentally clean. Our grand list will keep growing as more of these redevelopments become completed. The surrounding area is going to benefit from the traffic safety improvements that we are completing by spring of 2011. And town's record of business vitality and success is similar all along Black Rock Turnpike. As you know, Fairfield has become a destination, and it is known throughout Fairfield County as the dining and arts capital of coastal Connecticut. And I am so proud of this era of civic vitality and renaissance in our town. It's very exciting to work with property owners and merchants improving our town's quality of life. Another example of public-private cooperation involves the recent creation of an indoor sports complex located next to our town's recreation center on a private site. When I led town to acquire this part of this former Fairpreen site for a fraction of what it's worth today, we established a permanent home for our recreation department and center, and added 200 commuter parking places across the street. My desire was to see the back part of the parcel improved as well, and I worked to help convince the new owners of the site to renovate the old factory instead of tearing it down. Their vision of an array of specialized sports venues alongside the recreation center has now borne fruit, and town is getting many tax dollars from these private owners, and we appreciate that. This year, we've worked with those same owners to refurbish the rest of the back town parking lot on our parcel, saving the town from spending over $150,000. And those owners just recently restored the traffic signal on Mill Plain, completing a TPZ condition that I remember some members of this RTM sought 3 years ago. I am so pleased to report that in 2011, we will complete the new train station and commuter parking in our large public park along Ash Creek. By late 2011, this ADA accessible station with nearly 1,500 parking spaces will finally allow residents to park at whichever train station commuters choose. We will cut the waiting list by 75%, and commuters will no longer have to wait 5 to 7 years to get permits to park and take mass transit to work. This will reduce traffic on our local streets, and new coastal green belts will be a draw for bicyclists and walkers alike. I do believe that the private site owner will finally be able to begin their proposed office park area, which will in turn translate ultimately into millions of dollars annually for our town coffers and help offset future tax needs. I'd like to thank and applaud the outstanding efforts of Town Attorney Saxel, Economic Development Director Barnhart, Town Engineer Bill Hurley, and others who have helped me to manage this historic project. We can now guarantee the town is getting great results with almost use of no town funds needed or expended by the time this project is finished, because of our success at getting grants to cover the cost and private funds and efficiencies just recently achieved during the bidding and construction process. When this new station opens, the community will be justly proud, and we have this smart growth plan becomes a reality. On another economic development front, another priority we have championed for years is completion of the Exide property cleanup and economic revitalization of that cornerstone site. New progress was made just recently between the private owners and the DEP, and Attorney Saxel informed me that their plans last month showed major signs of finally coming together. The company is desirous of commencing the cleanup within a year of Mill River, and the state is adopting a proactive approach to try to make it happen quickly. Some may remember that for over 25 years, we all drove up and down along Route 1 looking at a wasteland with an old factory with dilapidated broken windows scarring our road. When I talked the owners into tearing down that factory during my first term, Our goal was to create a transition zone, and it still is, between Fairfield Center and the beauty of our Southport Village, by supporting, and I do support, the future plans for a privately owned creative mixed-use project and a green belt along the river. TPZ just a year ago issued positive guidelines, or maybe it was a year and a half, to enhance the area and to improve the potential for pedestrian access. In addition to creating these kind of positive quality of life initiatives, we are continuously seeking to keep town fiscal operations as lean and responsible as possible. Yet, 2011-12's budget again faces quite a difficult situation. I feel strongly we cannot afford to hire new hires to provide the level of services that our students and residents deserves. And the operational audits just completed for the town and the schools show that staffing levels are quite adequate at our schools, and that town staffing, while lean, is acceptable. So in early February, when I announce a proposed budget, I will ask Fairfielders to support town and education needs that I feel are absolutely necessary. And there will be, I believe, some budgetary increases needed to absorb the fixed and required costs, such as paving, employee benefit reserves, and utilities. Thankfully, the positive side of this year's reassessment will provide an offset for many of our citizens, in fact, most. And I am hopeful that most people will view the coming proposed budget as a common sense plan. Our town boards always perform a thorough job, and I expect debate and dialogue, but I expect it to be handled professionally and collegially. With the support and leadership of the Board of Finance, town has met rating agency requirements and has already appropriated over 80% of our annual, gotta spit that out right, annual actuarially required contributions to fund post-retirement, other post-employment benefit obligations. Our public safety workers have agreed over the past 2 years to be responsible for some of those health-related costs. But we must continue to pursue equitable sharing of those costs between town and its employees. Frankly, this has been the most difficult, worst part of our budgetary headaches. And as you know, the national health costs keep increasing. Meanwhile, our pension boards have engineered an incredibly solid comeback. The fund today now holds again nearly $300 million in marketable assets and is almost fully funded on a current basis. However, our town pension needs do still require the town to put aside some more money over the next 2 years. But we do not allow overtime or sick benefits like some communities to accrue toward pensions. And this administration is committed and has committed to seeking to restructure such benefits for future employees in the process of negotiations in order to reduce the town's future exposure. For our schools, it has been an absolute pleasure to welcome and begin to work with Dr. David Teitel. The superintendent is focused on continuing to improve the delivery of services in our excellent schools. Our Fairfield Woods Middle School expansion will solve the short-term needs for grades 6 through 8. And our high school buildings do have some important window and roof needs to be met now. And I'm working now to try to move that process along to fruition by the end of this year. One more initiative I'm planning to create is the creation of a town communications internet task force. Town is a wonderful web librarian, already working with a department group I formed last year to upgrade our town websites. But having several citizens serve on Internet Communications Committee, I believe, will help town managers find ways to make government even more accessible and open. The wave of the future is to provide government services as easily and customer-friendly as possible using the Internet. And technology needs to be used. It's going to be used soon as well to install a new approach for day parking at our train stations. We're going to put in ticketing machines, and we'll end up not needing day parking passes to be sent back by mail. Those who do not pay will now get parking police citations instead of these $6 fees with their, as Mike knows, with their $10 penalties, and some of which go unpaid for years. Our internal numbers show we could generate almost $100,000 in added collection and reduce costs while getting better service for our citizens. So in closing, with 2011 on us, local government officials and employees, we know are hard-working people, and you all care deeply about Fairfield. It is up to all of us to keep our community the caring, vibrant place we love. As 2011 unfolds and the winter wonderlands give ways, we hope, to the green of spring, I hope this may be a year of pride and much joy. May everyone remain healthy and happy. May the era of caring for each other continue forever. And may the sun shine on this beautiful community, and may good people keep it strong. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. The next item on the agenda is number 3, and looks like you'll be back up here. To receive the report from the First Selectman or his designee on leases of town properties.
Eileen Canelli is going to help present this report, our Deputy Town Attorney.
I did actually forget one-year lease that we entered into this past year on the report. Should have been on here. The Center for Women and Families from Bridgeport is renting a single room at the senior center for $150 per month for 1 year. So aside from that, everything on here is the rent report, or is the lease report, I'm sorry. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Oh, is this turned on? Thank you. Kristen McCarthy, Vahey, District 6. And my question is about a child's garden. Is the plan to keep this lease at the 1-year time frame? And just wanted to see what the rate is compared to market rates around town. I know we've had this conversation here at the RTM before. I know that there's some discussion now that's involving that space as a potential in the future, and I'm just wondering if that lease will remain in that time frame and pricing for that.
It's my understanding that it will indeed be renewed on an annual basis. Yes.
The second part of the question was just about pricing point comparison.
I think I will leave that to the First Selectman.
Yeah, I would say basically this is a kind of a unique space. As you know, it's a former small school space. It's not like market office space or warehouse space or industrial space. It can't be used for any commercial purpose. It's not in a commercial zone. So there really is no comparables to look at for this kind of lease. This has been here for, I think, 25 years now by other First Selectmen prior to myself. I've extended it. I have increased the rent. I think it was about $30,000 a year when I started, and now it's about $50,000 a year. So it's increased about 80% over the last 10 years. But I've tried to seek an escalator every year, and we continue to do that. The reason we keep it a short-term lease is that if the town were to eventually need it for a particular purpose of any kind, that we can make those decisions. And the lease has always had a provision to be able to be terminated, even if it were a 2-3-year lease, to be terminated with, I think it's a year's notice or 6 months' notice, I forget which.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the lease report from the body? Okay. The next item is number 4, to hear a report from the blight officer concerning condemnation and blight. Mr. Gillen? How are you?
Good evening. I'm Jim Gillerin. I'm the building official for the town of Fairfield and also the blight prevention officer. If we had last year's film, we could show it all over again because it's pretty much the same. And I wanted to know if we could get residuals for that because it's shown every night of the week on Channel 80. Most of the numbers have not changed. This annual speech to you as to whether to keep the blight ordinance in order or keep it up and running or discard it. With the number of calls we get over the years, which are blight and some are just plain old complaints from one neighbor who doesn't like the neighbor next door. Yes, we still need it. In front of you, I think we put on all the tables, was a correction to the original one that has the numbers of blighted properties, the numbers that have been cleaned up, number of outstanding fines that we've had, and one that we collected this year after about 3 years. That was thanks to probate court finally sold off the property and we collected on our lien. We collected $40,000. The mistake, one of the mistakes, you'll see in bold print on the front of my so-called speech here that the price went down from, actually I had to apologize to Jen Riley for some of the figures. They were wrong. It was brought to my attention tonight that as of today's date, Attorney Saxel brought to my attention that the Board of Selectmen had asked the owner of 26 Dalewood for a financial statement, and after receiving and reviewing it, they decided to reduce the total amount of fines from $110,000 to $16,900. That was done by the Board of Selectmen. On most of the fines that we've collected on for fines and citations over the years since the ordinance began, we have pretty much made deals with the owners or new owners of houses to correct those liens. And I don't know what the committee's intentions were in the beginning, but we've reduced the fines considerably, especially this one. However, in order to shorten delays in cleaning up these properties, the body should also consider exploring options to fund this ordinance. We've collected over $100,000 in the last 2.5 years, of which it goes into the general fund. It just disappears. A lot of the complaints that we get could be cleaned up in a matter of hours from the phone call instead of waiting months and sometimes even years to get them cleaned up for different reasons. Most people that we turn over to social services for help or to economic development, over to Mark, most of the people make too much money. They don't qualify for any of the help that those two organizations can give them. If we had some funding, we can make a pile of junk in somebody's yard go away, like I said, in a matter of hours. Depending on the price of it, we would lien the property and collect the monies later. But in the meantime, those who complain won't be, have to keep writing me letters every week asking me how come it's not done yet, how come it's not done. Most of the properties that are on this list and been on here for a while are commercial properties. We have brought in the owners of these commercial properties, and because of the economic times, they've come to our hearings, we've asked them what their plan is. I've been told, time and time again, okay, we're going to contract on this, we're going to sell the property. We don't have the money, we're still looking for tenants, whatever. And those are the biggest blighted pieces we have. And actually, one, for instance, was on Commerce Drive. Took us 2 years to get it down. We made a deal with the owner that we would take the price, what it cost him to tear it down, and take that off of the fines that he owed us. And we gave him till October 30th of last year, and he didn't pay us. So now he owes us the whole $63,000. I will go again, or the town attorney will go again to the Board of Selectmen and ask if they would like to foreclose on the property, which we have done on one other property that did owe us that much money. But the judge in that case also, it was $100,000 worth of fines, and he cut them in half in court. So I think if we had some funding and we clean up these properties for little bits, the fines won't get that high. The people will probably be able to pay off a lien rather than pay off some of the fines that get up to the $50,000, $60,000 category. And in some instances, we've had them as much as the house is worth. And I was told in the beginning, we're not in the business of taking properties. This was meant to help people, if anything. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Peter.
Through Peter Ambrose, District 2. Through you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Gillerin. Mr. Gillerin, you mentioned that this fine for the 26 Dalewood property was reduced from $110,300 to $16,900.
Yes.
And then you mentioned the Board of Selectmen voted to do this. Was
Yeah.
it the Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Well, then do you know when that meeting was?
No, I didn't ask Mr. Saxel exactly when the meeting was.
From memory, I think it was around 9 months ago, 12 months ago, something like that. I'm not sure if you remember.
When was the financial affidavit given?
It wasn't given to me, I don't know.
It just seems far-reaching that, I can see perhaps reducing a fine by 50%, provided that payment is made at that time and a resolution of the matter, but to reduce a fine by 5 times the amount of the fine and then not to exact a payment just doesn't make any sense. And I applaud your efforts, Mr. Gillerin, for doing such a fine job on the Blight Commission. I was one of the initial members, and I know we've come a long way, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to, in fact, impose fines and not require that they be exacted.
Want to take 1 minute, Pete?
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, just to help explain for 1 minute, if it's okay. As usual, everything is not as simple as it sounds, but there were a number of issues that were discussed. Part of it was in private executive session. I believe there may have been a small part of it when we voted in public session. But a couple of things. One is the list of items weren't formally codified. In other words, some of the things on Jim's list weren't on the original blight citation or violation. So there was no... the early things that were required were actually fixed by the homeowners and resident. So we heard the information, we reviewed it. There were additional things like the roof issue that came up after the initial thing. So we worked out a proposal that if they did the remaining roof within a certain period of time, that we would not recharge the fines. And it also has to do, like anything else, you look at the individual situation, the person, is a low, moderate income household, and so you review that, the selectmen did that, and, that's where we're at. But I can have Attorney Saxel follow up with you, if you wish, as far as whatever he feels comfortable, confiding.
Thank you. I mean, with all due respect, I think equity comes into these considerations, especially in this time. But again, to in fact reduce the fine by to that extent and not exact a lump sum payment really makes no sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks. And just to clarify, one of the problems was the fine. One can't fine if the item wasn't written up in a way that included all the different items. And if you look back at the correspondence, certain things were fixed within a certain period of time from the initial citation. Some of the later things ended up being added on, but they were never formally cited in writing. So some of the fines may not have been eligible, but there was a long conversation about what was reasonable and what wasn't. And our main intent on all these cases with homeowners, if they're existing homeowners and it's not an empty site or a vacant site, is to try to work with the homeowner to get them to fix the blight. And that was, I remember, the RTM's intent way back when was, less about fines and more about, let's fix the property and be done with it. But I'll have Attorney Saxel touch base with you.
Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, at Bateson District 3. Through you to Mr. Gillerin. On the sheet, I notice 346 Hallie Avenue. Last year it was $89,000, and it says we collected 40. Does that mean that there's a balance outstanding, or was that reduced also?
That was reduced by probate court. It was in probate, the woman had passed away, and the judge, there were other outstanding liens on the property, and we got...
So that one is now settled.
That's settled.
Yeah, and we actually did also in private exec take a vote on that, and we had to decide, did we want to agree to that?
Yeah, the probate judge awarded us the $40,000.
Okay, thank you. Concerning 47 Delldale Road, last year I have that on the list as complied, and this year it's coming back as pending. Does status change on that?
Yeah, the status did change. He complied and he brought more onto the property. We turned up, it was motor vehicles, which we give to planning and zoning. They give them an order to comply. He complied the first time and then brought more onto the property.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moderator, through you, I want to follow up on Representative Ambrose to the First Selectman concerning 26 Dalewood. You're saying 9 months ago that some sort of arrangement was arrived at whereby certain things were going to be performed to rectify the blight. Have they been done?
To my understanding from Attorney Saxel and Mr. Gillerin, some of the early things were done, but there were additional issues that arose during the period of time that Jim felt should be addressed. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, well, they actually, we had meetings with myself, Mr. Saxel, and the owner's attorneys, and there was a few dates that were disputed of when these things were fixed and when they were cited. Of course, we never came to an agreement on that. My paperwork said they owed us the money.
Over the past several years, obviously, this has been on our list and you've been supervising this.
5 years.
Is it getting better? Is it being rectified?
It is getting better.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, possibly through you to Assistant Town Attorney, Ms. Cannelli. When we place a lien on a property, the Board of Selectmen has purview over that. They can increase it, reduce it. That's just the way these things go. I mean, this is a fine or a penalty. That's the proper way these things work. I imagine there would have to be some sort of petition by the homeowner.
I think it would be correct to say that the Board of Selectmen would have the discretion to decide whether to reduce the fine, which was what was done in these cases.
So they could levy the fine, and they do have the power to reduce it to whatever extent they deem prudent.
In effect, it's like settling the matter, really, so that you have so much outstanding, but you know you can only collect so much, or there are other circumstances.
To date, have we collected anything?
I
Don't.
don't remember the exact amounts, but I think in over $100,000.
Over
has been
$100,000.
collected in blight fines today.
No, particular to Dalewood.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Nothing.
do not think so. I believe because of the situation of work being improved on the house, they were given more time, but I actually have to check with Attorney Sachs as to the latest status.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the body? Yeah, I want to make sure the body's good. Jim?
First of all, this Dalewood property is a little disturbing to me as well. I was not on the Board of Selectmen at that point in time when that was discussed. It's also disturbing to me that we settled this matter for 15% of the cost, and we still haven't been paid money. But I guess we'll look into that with Attorney Sachs on why that hasn't been done. My question to Mr. Gillering is, if you had a pool of money, say for example the $40,000 that the probate court settled that matter for, and we set up a fund that say what board is it that you and the condemnation board?
Yeah, so, the blight board, myself, and the condemnation board make up.
There's three of you on there, right?
Myself, the fire marshal, and the health director.
If there was a fund where, say, that $40,000 would go on in, or be funded to 40 or 50,000, and then the rest of any money after that would go into a general fund. Like, how many of these matters could be off the blight list within 30 days?
Probably 90% of them.
And that's, when I was on this body, and Ms. Dyer, happy to see that she's back on, we had talked about this a little bit, but we just didn't really have the time to finish that process, was that, the committee, I was on it both times, and we talked about maybe those funds should go to be taking care of blight problems, not going to the general fund. And I think that the committee should be reformed by this RTM, and they should work with the first selectman and the fiscal officer and figure out a way that when some of these cases are settled, there's a fund available to Mr. Gillering, or even to the Conservation Board in general, so that things that can immediately be done. I think the whole part of the goal of this ordinance was to remove blight from this community. And based on Mr. Gillering's own representation here, 90% of the matters that are currently here can be taken care of in 30 days if he just said $40,000. So instead of just taking his money and it'd be less than...
Yeah, some of the blighted properties on there are older people who just, don't have the, physically they're not able to clean it up. We could get them some help, and we're not talking about thousands and thousands of dollars, we're talking $500 to clean up somebody's property. They would be off the agenda.
They'd be off the agenda, you wouldn't have to keep receiving calls from the neighbors continually every month, wondering why it's not being taken care of, and what procedures were being followed, and all sorts of things like that.
Right.
So, I think the leadership, bipartisan leadership for this RTM should get together and maybe rewrite the blight ordinance to be able to have a pool of funds that Mr. Gillering could maybe take care of most of these blight items.
Yeah. It's not just myself that makes those decisions. It's actually the condemnation board, which is the fire marshal, the health director, Sans Cleary, and myself. So it's a board of three who would make the decision whether to clean the property up or, go after the owner who's capable. And, then again, you have to. If he doesn't clean it up, we'll send him a citation and go. I mean, there will be some of those on here. Some people just refuse to do it. But I could probably go down this whole list right now. Except for the commercial properties, they could all be cleaned up within 2 weeks. Patty.
Representative Dyer, District 6. Selectman Walsh, your comments are interestingly timely in that Representative Stamler from District 5 and myself were discussing this. And when we rewrote the blight ordinance 3 years ago, I believe it was the intent of the committee, and we did in fact sort of make inquiries to get the ball rolling to set aside a fund for the blight officer so that he could in fact take care of some of these properties. And I think First Selectman Flato made a really good point when he stood up here before and said it was not the intent of the committee to collect or accrue fines, but to help the people clean up their properties. And I think that that was a lot of the conversation that we had when we revised the blight ordinance. So Representative Stamler and myself are intending to put forward, we'll sit down with the town attorney or the assistant town attorney and discuss the correct legalities for putting forth either an amendment to the ordinance, exactly how the legalities of that work so that we can look into getting voted on a fund that would help the blight officer clean up some of these properties. So Representative Stamler and myself are interested in putting this forth. If there's someone else that's interested that would like to help support us in this, can you see us afterwards? Thank you.
There are probably half a dozen properties that over the last 2 or 3 years that Mr. Gilmer is going to be, and we have had to expend some funds on several occasions to do some work. I don't have an accounting as what it is. Normally we've taken these funds out of what is called the miscellaneous contingency account of the town, but I don't want you to think that we haven't incurred some costs here. We have.
Yeah, the one house that we basically, we have used some funds. Like Paul said, they weren't from any of the fines. We spent a total of $6,800 cleaning up a house on Tuckahoe that had been on our agenda for 5 years. But we collected $50,000 from the owner. I went to the First Selectman and Mr. Hiller, and in other words, to help the neighbors out who've been waiting 5 or 6 years for this property to get cleaned up. I mean, we did collect $50,000 from the gentleman who owns it. Let's spend $6,000 of it to make it presentable. And we did, and in 2 weeks, all the brush trees were cut down, the house shingles repaired, trim repaired, chimney repaired, painted. And the house was painted all for $6,000. So it was well worth it. We still wound up with $44,000.
Representative.
Jamie Millington, District 9. I too remember discussing this fund on the side to assist with the blight, and it's something that I would agree that we need to address. I'll talk to Representative McCarthy-Vahey, and we can pull some people from the Republican side of the aisle and work together to see if we can re-explore opening that up, and also maybe looking at the ordinance as it's affected when we have these cases where we accrue these large amounts of fines, maybe putting in there some sort of process for review instead of just having it one person pays, another person claims hardship, so we collect full fine from one person. Because the other person didn't want to pay and complained, we just somehow, without any formula, reduce the number to whatever it is. And maybe there was a formula in executive session that we don't know, but maybe if we can just have the process be more open, that would be something that I'd like to look at as well.
Representative Lynch, District 7. I have just one question on 1280 Stratfield Road. There's a check mark by complied, and then the note is ongoing. So were they cited and fixed, or are they ongoing?
A number of times. As you know, that was the old supermarket, Walmart, whoever. We had gotten complaints about doors being open. They've gone over, they've boarded up the doors. They painted the rusting compactor in the back. They've fixed, every time we get a written complaint, we call the attorneys and the owners, and they go over and correct it. Yeah, they were complaining, we had complaints about people dumping their trash over there. So what they did is actually put a dumpster there for the people who dumped their trash in. You know, I'm serious, they did. They put,
Okay, so this is not going to make that, 90% cleanup.
It's not
list
going to
that you
go,
have.
it's not going to
This
make
is
it
gonna
go
be a
away
thorn in your side
until they
for-
build a Walmart, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or Walgreens, whatever. Actually, they probably like a Walmart over there.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Geller.
Thank you.
The next item is number 5, to hear a report from the First Selectman on the Fairfield 3rd Train Station and Metro Center Parking and Site Infrastructure Project.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll try to do this relatively briefly. I handed out a report that's on your tables, but basically I'd just like to cover 4 or 5 items since our last report, and that is to just update the neighborhood and intersection traffic safety improvements. We were hoping to finish everything by January, partly due to weather, partly due to the inspection process of the state. It's taking a little longer. The anticipated completion of that now is for April, so all those traffic lights out there that you see, the new ones that are being installed that are still wrapped up in plastic cellophane, will be in operation by April, and the project, that part of the off-site work complete. The state's work on the state part of the project, the platforms, the bridge, and all that, is now at the 95% completion level, so they're, for all intents and purposes, substantially complete. What they are going to be doing is pretty much having a security guard there when they finish the work, when the contractor finishes in the spring, early summer. They'll have security there until the point at which the station opens, and then there will be obviously an ongoing security firm hired as part of their new management of the new train station. On the town project, work is full steam progressing. Even with the severe winter conditions, they have been clearing the areas that need to allow construction continue on a daily basis. Work has begun, and the shoreline remediation is about almost 50% complete now. That's one of the most complex parts of the work on the site. All of the work relating to the inland wetland part of the project, the tidal wetland part of the project, is anticipated to be finished by June or July, which is really good news. I think I might have mentioned this last time, but if I didn't, some of you, when you drive by, you'll notice things that look like kind of poles that are up in the westerly part of the site. Those poles actually are where the wetland areas are going to be, and those poles are going to be walkways, elevated walkways that are actually going to be over those wetland areas, and then there'll be walking trails on the green space around the wetland areas. But it's kind of interesting to see that stuff starting to formulate. The major paving, all the capping of the site will be finished, will be the last part of the site, even though certain pieces of capping are starting. Most of the capping and all of the paving is going to start in the spring when the asphalt plants reopen, and is contemplated to be finished by October or early November. And, like I said, for the most part, work is going exceedingly well. They have been on or ahead of schedule so far to date. There are certain tricky aspects of the work, such as the retaining walls, when they go up in the spring, that have to be measured, and a lot of things have to be done that hopefully will not cause any, delays of any significance. But I would guess at the most we'd be talking weeks if there were any complications with any of that work. So the project completion, which the contract called for, is by November 2011. The vendor has an incentive to complete it earlier, so we're very hopeful that it will be completed by November 2011. As far as the budget aspects of it, all expectations are being met. 30% of the construction costs have now been billed and expended. The reimbursements from the state and the private developer have been received and covering 90% of those costs. The state sometimes it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get those reimbursements. The state process takes a little time sometimes, but that's going very, very well. And we do believe, I do believe that the project at this point does, knock on wood, look to be completed below budget. I hesitate to give you a guess. Mark Barnhart keeps telling me not to make any specific predictions, but I can tell you that given the amount of contingency and given the progress so far, it does look very, very good at this point, and hopefully it'll look really good. But I'd rather have the town officials have us all talk about that next summer, next fall, as the project nears completion. The state's plans for opening the train station. This is a few highlights of a meeting we had last month. The state does at this point anticipate seeking to have their regular stops, those stops that are on the current Metro-North schedule, for as many of those stops as possible. They're anticipating adding a stop for the new station and not taking away stops at any of our existing stations, which I think from the long-term perspective is a very good thing for us, so the commuters don't have to change their schedule. Of course, it does mean that there'll be a few more people getting on the train earlier at that new station, and there's going to be some logistics to work out in that regard, but that's the current plan. There is some confusion. I think perhaps there was one letter that was recently written that was in error in the paper, but I'd just like to give you the short version. And this was actually codified in our three-party agreement 10 years ago to some extent. But the state reaffirmed this last month, and we're having a meeting in 2 weeks. I was just talking to Representative Fawcett about it. The sequence is that people that have existing permits for Fairfield Center or Southport will be given a one-shot opportunity next summer to decide if they want to transfer and change their permit to the new station. They won't be able to have 2 permits. They'd be able to have 1 permit either at the new station in lieu of the permit they have now, or obviously keep their existing permit. Once that sequence is done, then all the additional parking that remains both at the new station and obviously at our existing stations, because our belief is about 30 to 40% of those that park downtown may switch to the new station. I based that on a survey we did about 8 years ago that gave that indication. But however many people change permits to the new station, that will open up spots at Fairfield Center and possibly a few in Southport, and then those spots would go down the waiting list for whoever's first in line on the waiting list. And the full waiting list will be getting a mailing at some point, probably by late summer, inviting them to then apply for spots at the new train station. The exact logistics of that remains to be determined. That's why we're having another meeting. The parking authority needs to be, our town parking authority needs to be involved in that. And so the state has indicated they're interested in the town taking the lead on managing that. I think that's a good thing, because this way, we certainly know the local stations and how they work. So I hope that will play out that way. But I wanted to just spend 2 minutes on that aspect of the plan. And that's pretty much where we're at this point. Obviously happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions?
Normally it's from the body.
Representative Becker? Just, so you know, we're taking questions only from the body. Members of the public can have questions on resolutions, but not presentations or reports.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. Through you to the First Selectman, I've got a question in regards to who's going to manage this. You had mentioned it seems that an outside company, it's not going to involve the parking authority. Are they going to be at some stage of involvement once all the permits are transferred, as
Right.
they are with the other two stations?
Our existing stations are currently, the state has given a lease to the Fairfield Parking Authority to manage the existing stations. I think that runs through 2014, but it usually gets renewed pretty, knock on wood, pretty consistently. For the new station, the state is going to be managing the new station, not the town or the parking authority. The state actually, apparently, and I found this out 2 weeks ago, added this station to their list of stations, including the Bridgeport station that they manage, and the same vendor that it was hired to do those stations is going to be responsible for maintaining and monitoring the new station. But as far as the permitting aspect of it, that's the part that we still are working out, and we haven't figured out or finalized who would be doing that work, whether we would try to locally keep doing that for them, or whether they would want to do that as part of the state DOT operation. So that part I don't have a clear answer on yet.
And is there anything that the town can do about that? Because I believe one concern that I would have, that I've heard from several people, including some people through the parking authority, is that if you take a state or other sort of management company type of a station, and you take the parking authority where it's a little bit more locally involved, obviously quite locally involved, that you may end up starting to have some problems over time. They've done a spectacular job, and they keep getting better and better at it, and making sure they're very responsible with handling any issues at the two existing stations. So if you shift that to the state, it's in our backyard, it's our residents that are primarily there. So is there anything that we can do to involve the parking authority?
We did, and as recently as last year, from the administration perspective, we did ask for that opportunity. The state chose, DOT chose not to do that at this point. I think they have a long-term desire to have the state manage all the stations in a uniform manner. I agree that having some local input and some control through a parking authority is a good thing for the community, but that's the approach they've taken on this one so far. Hopefully we could revisit that, but that's the approach that they took. That was actually something way back when this thing started, that they did say to us that if they were going to use state money to help build the station, which now has become 80% state money, they wanted to be in control of the ownership of the station, and that was something we had to agree to back when the town bodies approved this back in 1999. Or, I'm sorry, 2003.
The only other point would be if there is some sort of a specific board that handles managing this even at the state level, possibly Fairfield could try and get a representative on that, so that our interests are more closely tied. Our community, if you look at the statistics, is almost tops the list of the busiest train stations on this particular corridor, so I don't think that'd be an unreasonable thing.
I agree. And there is one thing, they are already working in concert. Their leadership has asked for a meeting with our PD about safety coordination and things like that, and I know that's in the works. So there's a whole list of things we do have to talk with them about, and we have a meeting, I think it's on the 30th, a follow-up meeting with them. For those of you interested, the name of the station is as well an item that still has to be resolved, and I'm sure our state reps will follow that process pretty closely. But I agree with the sentiment and think that it's good to have some local involvement in that, and we'll keep seeking that.
So after that particular meeting, I know that you're not coming here necessarily monthly at this point, but if there's a way maybe to
get feedback,
advise us of some of that, even in writing. I know some of it goes to the press, but those are obviously, do a full presentation, but certainly get some of that out, because I know some of those questions are kind
No, I think
of
that's good. And what our goal was basically by June to have whatever work has to be done, finalized, whatever. For example, there are a whole bunch of legal documents that had transfers of property, things like that have to take place when the station gets finished. So we have to go through that whole checklist of items and make sure they're all covered.
Thank you.
And just to summarize, Representative Becker, I think that is a request that we've talked about before, that we would have at minimum quarterly updates verbally, and then if there's anything in between that comes up, we would at least have an update in writing. So I think that is important. Were there any other questions? Representative Braun?
Kathy Braun, District 8. Through you, moderator, to the First Selectman. To follow up on the revenue, my understanding is that from the beginning, and I think you alluded to that, we would be transferring the station over to the state. They would own it. They would get the revenue, and they had the option of giving the town a portion of that revenue up to a certain amount.
Correct. We have basically an agreement that says the town gets $300,000 a year of the net proceeds after their operating costs, the first $300,000 a year of proceeds, in other words, parking revenue, less all the expenses associated with the station and operating and that stuff. We would get net revenue over that if it materializes, which I believe it will. It's very hard to predict what those numbers are because we don't know what their costs of operating are. So that's one of the items that, it could be anybody's guess. If I just give you a rough, if you don't mind my taking a minute or two, if I just give you kind of a rough sense of it, if we took, say, the average of what we get now at the downtown station, let's say the parking permits are similar to that. It's about $400 a year, a little under $400 a year per permit. And the anticipation is that they'll be selling over 2,000 permits. You oversell by about 20-25% the number of spots you have at the lot. So roughly, say, $400 a year times 2,000, that would be about $800,000 a year. Because it's a new lot, the maintenance needs are going to be minimal. To my knowledge, really, the only major costs will be the monitoring, the permitting aspects of it, their payback of any debt service that they consider a cost. And my belief is that when you add that stuff up, it's hard for me to imagine that they would expend more than $500,000 a year on that lot, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, maybe 10 or 20 years from now, there'd be capital improvements and paving needs and stuff like that. So my gut is that I actually think both the town and the state will profit. Shouldn't use the word profit, it's a public project, will benefit from revenue from this net of costs. I think that's their hope too, but the contract requires us to get up to the first $300,000 of anything beyond their direct expenses.
And that's up to the state's discretion how much of up to that $300,000 the town would get.
No. They would define the expenses, but the first $300,000 beyond that is not a discretionary item. We get that first $300,000. They get everything beyond that. And for argument's sake, if they made the permit fees higher, they could potentially get more, but that remains to be seen.
Now, since the state has put in an extra $20 million approximately as a result of the renegotiation last April, when to do what the developer couldn't do because it was in foreclosure and all that, is that the debt service you're talking about, that the state might want to be paid back before we get the revenues?
Yes, they said that they felt that the principal part of the debt service, it's $90,000 a year, needs to be considered part of the cost that they consider for their cost of the station. So that would be part of the expense piece. But again, the way I look at it, and my belief is that when they tally those expenses as they go, that you won't see very heavy amounts of expenditures needed unless something unforeseen happens. So my hope is there'll be, both from the town and the state point of view, a lot of revenue left over. But for the first 20 years, for the first 20 years, we have the rights to the first $300,000 over expenses before the state would have the rights to any additional
And the
money.
debt service is the $20 million, is that over 20 years also? That's the state debt service that they want to be paid back.
The
Is that what you were talking
The
about?
$19 million.
$19.4 million, yeah. Okay. Just to piggyback on that, this has to do with environmental issues, and I do understand, I've watched a bunch of hearings and commission meetings, that there are many private, site monitors and whatnot on the site. However, as you know, the Conservation Department has been removed for 3 years. And I sort of analogize that to if you removed the police department from that region of town and told them, you're never going back. We're going to have a private security force enforcing the law and being our sort of boots on the ground. It's my position that, now that the town is doing what the private developer was going to do on the public portion, and now that the state is using public funds to essentially clean up the private developer's remaining property, I just don't see how there can be any complaint from that private developer anymore that we should not allow our conservation department back on the site. So I'm going to ask you again, when, if not now, when will you authorize our conservation department to set foot back on that site? They've been off for 3 years. And if not now, when? Is this a forever kind of situation? We're always going to have a private security force or private, environmental people on the site.
Right. I know in the past we say with these reports we stick to construction, but I'll just briefly say, the Conservation Commission has voted, and I concur that the process that's in place now continue, and that to me is the most effective way to finish the project. It's being done right, so I don't think it really matters. I think but I won't get into it beyond that.
Although the commission also said that because you removed the department, only you could authorize to restore the department. So my concern is there's no end point. It could be, these remediation, the plastic membrane they're putting down that's on the public portion, that's the park portion, that's covering up a lot of contaminated stuff. And the wetlands are going to have, I believe, a stewardship easement and a conservation easement. That goes on for a long time. So is there any end point in sight when you foresee you allowing the Conservation Department to set foot back on that 35-acre parcel of land?
Well, again, it's ultimately up to the commission, but my own personal perspective is that the process in place is the best process. I think that the delays that took place years ago were untenable, unreasonable, unnecessary, and I think that the right thing is happening now. And,
So if it's up to the commission, that's good, because they thought it was up to you.
Well, if I advised them, I would advise them to that effect.
Okay, so it's up to the commission. Thank you.
It's a joint process, but certainly they have a lot to say in it, and they did vote the process. So,
But they think it's up to you. So now it's up to them. That's good to know. Thank you.
We're going to move on. So, any other questions? Okay. The next item is number 6, to hear a report on school enrollment projections from MGT of America. This item is being withdrawn due to recent new information and the lack of sufficient time for analysis of this information. The next item is number 7, to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular meeting held on December 20th, 2010. Are there any proposed amendments or revisions to the minutes from the body? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve. Representative DiMartino, I have a second. Representative Ambrose. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Motion passes. Next is the consent calendar. This month there were no items on consent as 2 of the committees did not have a quorum. Next item is number 8, to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment to the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Robert M. Stilson, 103 Orchard Hill Drive, term November 2010 to 2014. This item was referred to the Standing Committees on Legislation Administration and Public Works and Planning. May I have a motion to approve? Representative Schwartz, a second. Representative Brogan. We'll now go to committee reports. L&A first.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Oh, yes.
Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, District 6. Mr. Stilson was present and noted that he had expressed interest in volunteering to the First Selectman, and this commission, as we all know from earlier meetings, was in need of additional members. He's an eager and willing volunteer who has knowledge of town government through his past service on the RTM and the Board of Finance. Various committee members expressed a desire during the course of the meeting and the conversation for the following information with appointments: a list of commission members, including party affiliation, available vacancies, and the Board of Selectmen's recommendation for appointment and reasoning. Thank you. Oh, excuse me, I'm remiss. I haven't done this in a while. The vote was 4-0-2, and also present at the meeting was Representative Bateson, Varian, Stamler, Llewellyn, Steele, and McCarthy-Vahey. Thanks.
Good job for having not done it in a while. Public Works.
Tom McCarthy, District 8. Okay. Addressing the subcommittee, Mr. Stilson spoke to his past experience as an elected official in Fairfield, serving on both the RTM and Fairfield and Board of Finance. He knew his professional experience lies in finance and accounting. He stated while he had no specific experience or interest in solid waste per se, he was generally interested in serving the town of Fairfield in any capacity. For him, this appointment represents an opportunity to become re-engaged in public service to the town of Fairfield. Financial Officer Paul Hillard pointed out the challenges awaiting Solid Waste and Recycling Commission in coming months. Representative Brogan expressed his support and stated that he felt that an individual with Mr. Siller's financial acumen would be a welcome addition to the commission. Mr. Zillman's appointment was unanimously approved by the members of this subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCarthy. Now we will have discussion by the body. Hearing none, is there any comments from the public? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, we'll now vote on item number 8, to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment to the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Robert M. Stilson, 103 Orchard Hill Drive, term November 2010 to 2014. Do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Stilson. Thank you. Next item is number 9, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Assistant Town Attorney. Resolved that the attached temporary utility and septic easement from the Town of Fairfield to Thomas Reddington be and hereby is approved. This item is referred to all standing committees. May I have a motion to approve? Representative Bateson. A second, Representative Fellner. We'll now go to committee reports. L&A. Yep. You're first.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, District 6. And we discussed these items jointly. And in terms of, there were a few items that impacted both easements. And Assistant Town Attorney Eileen Kennelly and the Conservation Department's Annette Jacobson presented the information. Changes were made to the easement to provide for indemnity. The property owners have seen the amended documents and are willing to sign the updated agreements. Representative Varian noted a few typographical errors, which Ms. Kennelly noted, and said that Attorney Dick Saxel was aware of these, the specifics of which are in these minutes and have been passed along. The Reddington easement is temporary due to the fact that if they subdivide, there is no longer an easement. In response to a question by Representative Bateson, Attorney Kennelly noted that the Reddingtons are given the right to construct in the event that the current septic system fails, and the right to access the land is limited for utility purposes only. The vote on this item was 6-0-0.
Thank you. Public Works and Planning?
Tom McCarthy, District 8. Resolutions 9 and 10 were reviewed jointly and in parallel. Annette Jacobson from the Town Conservation Department made a presentation to the subcommittee in which she identified through the use of maps and areas of encroachment referenced in items 9 and 10. She offered some historical perspective, noting that it had been acquired by the Archdiocese of Bridgeport through the help of a state grant and set aside for passive use. She noted the encroachment was first discovered in 2002 by Tom Stenke, subsequent to the acquisition of the property. She added Mr. Reddington at that time explored the possibility of bringing in a sewer line. Representative Connolly pointed out that granting the easement was the most expeditious way of resolving this matter. The subcommittee generally pleased with the indemnification language that had been added to this agreement. Resolutions 9 and 10 were passed unanimously.
Thank you, Representative McCarthy. Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. We had no quorum at our meeting. We had 4 members that were present. Some of the questions that were asked were if a new owner were to take over this property, what would happen? And we were told that unless it was subdivided, that the easements would stay in place. We did have questions in regards to why it took over 9 years for this to get sorted out from the original time that this was put in place to now come before us for the actual easement to be finalized. And there was really no specific reason. It was told, I guess, there were some questions about whether or not they were going to potentially subdivide, and the end result was that they're at this time not going to, and they wanted the easements. We also asked questions in regards to whether or not the trees could be taken down on the easement land, and we were told yes. And again, there was no vote taken, no quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Becker. Education and Recreation. Representative Richmond.
Carolyn Richmond, District 1, Secretary of the Education Recreation Committee. We had 5 members present, and so we had no quorum to vote on this item. But speaking for the resolution was Annette Jacobson of the Conservation Department and Eileen Kennelly, Assistant Town Attorney. A discussion followed similar to what the other committee said, but again, no vote was taken.
Thank you. Public Health and Safety.
Michael Hurley, District 1. We had the same presentation as the other committees. Any questions that were asked were already answered by the other presentation reports, and the vote was 6 in favor, 0 against, and no abstentions.
Thank you, Representative Hurley. Now we'll have discussion by the body. Anybody? Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Representative Bateson, District 3. Can I address a representative?
I'm sorry?
Through you, can I address a representative?
Sure.
Representative Varian, where are you? In L&A, we asked for changes. Was that to item number 10, the driveway easement? To Ms. Kennelly, I think the only thing we had open here was the signatures. There was no signature lines for the town of Fairfield, correct?
I believe there are actually 3 or 4 small items that need to be corrected, but all of them are minor, can be corrected easily. And Attorney Saxel assures me that he will send a copy to Attorney Ambrose, Representative Ambrose, and myself, so we can make sure all those corrections get made.
Oh. Okay, so what's before me is the uncorrected document.
Correct.
Okay. How do we do that then? If we know there's something wrong, do we, you know what I'm getting at?
I think under the circumstances, you can accept my representation that we'll correct the formal errors before it's signed.
Ooh. Okay. So, so you're representing to us that those corrections will be made?
Yes. And that not only myself, but Representative Ambrose will have an opportunity to see them before it's signed. To make
Okay,
sure
thank
that they
you.
are made.
Representative McCarthy Vahey.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kristen McCarthy, Vahey, District 6. I'm going to read the rest of this, the specific typographical errors that were discussed, so that this is part of the record. The Crescia driveway easement used the word temporary, and the easement is not. Attorney Kennelly is aware of this. Both need a place for the signature for the town, which was just stated, and the dates on the easement need to be changed from 2010 to 2011. Those were the discussed errors. Representative Ambrose might have had a conversation about others, but just to clarify so that everyone knows what that conversation was about. Thank you.
Anybody else? And Representative Ambrose, you're clear on all of this as well.
Peter Ambrose, District 2. I spent a fair amount of time with Attorney Kennelly in her office. I reviewed the same concerns that Representative Varian had with respect to the failure to add signatures on both of the easements, and also discussed the language just mentioned by Representative Kristen McVeigh. So I will make certain that those changes are done.
Are there any other comments? Hearing none, are there any comments from the public? Okay, hearing no further discussion, we'll now vote on item number 9 under the assumption that all of these small minor changes will be addressed. And number 9, again, is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Assistant Town Attorney. Resolve that the attached temporary utility and septic easement from the Town of Fairfield to Thomas Reddington be and hereby is approved. We're going to do this by voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. Representative Dyer? Abstentions? Motion passes. Next item is number 10, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Assistant Town Attorney. Resolved that the attached driveway and lawn easement from the Town of Fairfield to Christopher J. Thomas and Tina Crescia be and hereby is approved. This item is also referred to all standing committees. May I have a motion to approve? Representative Braun, a second. Representative Smay. We'll now go to committee reports. And Representative McCarthy Vahey, you're up. L&A.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As noted in the report about item 10, we heard these items jointly, and the vote, I discussed the same questions and concerns earlier. The vote was 6-0-0.
Thank you. Public Works and Planning.
Yes, as stated previously with the prior item, the Reddington easement, these were addressed jointly and in parallel. I wrote it up that way. I have nothing new to add, and again, the resolution was carried unanimously by this subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. Finance?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. We heard this jointly with item number 9. I have nothing further to add, and again, there was no quorum, so no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Education and Recreation.
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. We also considered item 9 and 10 together, but as there was no quorum, we took no vote.
Public health and safety.
Michael Hurley, District 1. We have nothing to add beyond what was already discussed by the other committees. The vote was 6 in favor, 0 against, and no abstentions.
Thank you. Now we'll have discussion by the body on item number 10. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Any comments from the public? Hearing no further discussion, we'll now vote on item number 10. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Assistant Town Attorney. Resolved that the attached driveway and lawn easement from the Town of Fairfield to Christopher J. Thomas and Tina Kresha be and hereby is approved. Do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is number 11, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolved that the attached lease for 20 years with Fairfield Indoor Tennis Incorporated to rebuild the Beanery and Tennis Center be and hereby is approved. This item was referred to all standing committees. May I have a motion to approve? Representative Bateson, a second. Representative Llewellyn. We'll now go to committee reports. LNA.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The presenters to the committee were Jerry Lombardo, the Director of Parks and Recreation, Jeff, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, and I apologize, Goke, I believe it is, General Manager of Fairfield Indoor Tennis, Harry Peden, the Principal Attorney for Principal/Attorney, Jerome Kerner, the architect from DCS Architectural Design Planning of Pleasantville, New York. In terms of the building itself, the 8875 square foot new building will replace 2 structures which total 9,000 square feet and will include Beanery, public restrooms which will be accessible from the outdoors, and shared office space. The golf offices have been moved across the street, but conference rooms in the new building will be available for their use. The Beanery square footage will remain at 7,600 and will be used for youth programs and after-school special ed programs. Other space will now be used for daytime programs. Parks and Rec will be coming forward to ask town bodies for $40,000 to cover the costs of special materials for the Beanery, flooring and glass that will allow youth to be supervised by less staff, and for an outdoor patio. Representative Steele asked why these costs were not borne by Fairfield Indoor Tennis, and Mr. Lombardo responded it was part of the negotiations with them and the fact that the town will increase its usage of the facility as a result of these upgrades. The current building, 30% to 40% of it encroaches on a wetland buffer. The new building will be outside of the buffer. Tennis ends at 11 p.m. in both the winter and summer, and the usage of the Beanery is expected to increase, particularly in the summer months. Tennis users number 1,000 in the winter and 150 regular members in the summer, with others who use it not as regular members. FIT runs the winter program and the town runs the summer tennis program. If all approvals go smoothly, work would begin next fall with an opening anticipated for the spring or summer. In terms of the site plan, the parking area will be reconfigured for a safer circulatory pattern. The new parking area will be located on the area of the current putting green, which is being moved. The parking spaces will increase, but the amount of impervious surface will not. FIT will pay for materials for the work on site, and the town will provide the labor. The tree warden has been consulted about the one tree anticipated to be removed. It is located near the driveway. All other trees will remain. Representative McCarthy-Vahey asked if consideration had been given to adding a sidewalk to connect this facility with the other recreational facilities on the street. Mr. Lombardo said it had not, but he could speak to Public Works about this. If any environmental problems occur when the existing structures are raised, the town is financially responsible for mitigation. The lease itself. The Fairfield Indoor Tennis has been leasing from the town for 18 years in 5-year increments. They were the only bidder from the RFP and will spend $4.8 million over the life of the contract. 2.3 for the building, and 1.3 for the lease. Their current lease is $160,088. The new lease increases after 15 years due to the anticipated end of financing. The amounts for each of the last 5 years of the lease are arbitrary, having been negotiated with the town. Representative Bateson asked the amount of the performance bond. Attorney Kennelly anticipates it will be $2 million. The new lease is in generally the same form as past leases. Representative Bateson expressed concern that the town seemed to be the guarantor. Attorney Kennelly, as well as FIT Attorney Peden, asserted that the town is in no way a guarantor. The town is never required to buy the bank out in the event of default by FIT. However, the town has the option to do so if it desires. Fairfield Indoor Tennis has no commitment for financing at this time, as no bank was willing to go forward without written verification of approval. They have spoken with banks who are willing to move forward pending approval of the lease. Assistant Town Attorney Kennelly is satisfied with all insurance clauses. The vote on this item was 4-0-2.
Thank you. Public Works and Planning. I think she captured everything there. You were now.
Tom McCarthy, District 8. Jerry Lombardo, Recreation Director, with the assistance of Jerome Kenner, the architect, presented an overview of the proposed new beanery/tennis center, the construction of which would be part of an agreement for 20-year lease of the facility by the town of Fairfield to the Fairfield Indoor Tennis. He explained that the project would involve repositioning of the structure from its current footprint, as well as a reconfiguration of the interior space to afford greater functionality while maintaining the same total number of square feet. The new structure would be low maintenance, energy efficient, and ADA accessible. Fairfield Indoor Tennis would bear the full cost of construction with the exception of $40,000 for glass interior wall and some special flooring, which would be funded out of the Parks and Recs. Jerry Grocky and Harry Pendon, representing Fairfield Indoor Tennis, were also present to answer questions. Assistant Town Attorney Kennelly spoke to the performance bond, which would be posted and would remain in force for the duration of the construction period, noting that this would be the only mechanism in place to mitigate exposure to the town. A financial analysis prepared by Phoenix Advisory demonstrated that allowing FIT to manage the construction project would result in greater bottom line savings to the town than would otherwise be realized were the town to manage and bond the project itself. Jerry Lombardo stressed this arrangement would be a win-win for both parties, and the members of this subcommittee agreed. The resolution was passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. With the two previous reports, it's covered everything from our committee. So again, we have no quorum, so no vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Education and Recreation?
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. We also had no quorums, there was no vote, and the previous reports are the same, similar discussions that we had.
Okay, thank you. Public Health and Safety?
Michael Hurley, District 1. Nothing new to add on the background on the presentation. One question, Rep. Hug asked if solar heating was considered. Mr. Kerner said that it could be considered, but given the direction of the roof, which was westward facing, it would not be optimal. The vote was 6 in favor, 0 against, and no abstentions.
Thank you, Representative Hurley. Now we will have discussion by the body on item number 11. Is there any discussion? Yes, Representative Braun?
Catherine Braun, District 8. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'm not sure who has the answer. We had a question on page 6, paragraph 9E, about the amount of insurance. It says lessee shall furnish proof of public liability insurance in the amounts of $1 million/3 million. We all thought that meant 1 million for property and 3 million for liability. Could somebody explain what that is?
Assistant Town Attorney Kennelly.
No, that's all for liability insurance. It's 1 million per occurrence, 3 million aggregate.
So the town has its own property insurance then?
Correct. It will actually be our property, but there will be some additional property insurance put up by FIT because of their occupation of the building for part of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Representative Hoffman?
Liz Hoffman, District 8. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I think, I'm not sure, would it be to Jerry Lombardo about the kind of pro forma here? Or?
Wait, why don't you state your question and we'll see.
Okay, the question is, I'm looking at the scenario 1 and the scenario 2. And scenario 2, first of all, when I look at things 20 years out with firm numbers to the dollar, it gets me a little nervous because 20 years, it's hard to estimate, I believe, in terms of what rents would be. But the question is, in this scenario 2, isn't there going to be a cost for the town of maintaining the exterior and interior? Wouldn't that be subtracted out of what we get in rent?
Is this Mr. Lombardo? Mr. Lombardo, do you want to address that?
Let me just address one thing. Ms. Hoffman, the rents that are shown in scenario 2 are actually written into the lease, so those are solid numbers in scenario 2.
These are solid? Okay. So the costs of maintaining are in there?
No, the cost of maintenance are not worked in there, but they're also not worked into the scenario 1 numbers.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Not really.
Jerry, do you want to give that a shot?
That's probably the best she's going to get.
Yeah, okay. Or go back and explain the process.
What we
a little.
do is, we're just showing, what we're trying to do is show whether the town built it in scenario 1 versus leasing it out on that. As far as the maintenance, obviously the maintenance is going to be less than what we're doing now to the existing facilities. Basically, we haven't done a lot to the existing facility. That comes out of our DPW building and maintenance facility. But this being a new structure, it being a Butler-type building, we don't foresee an increase. In fact, we hope to see a decrease, and we expect a decrease in our maintenance costs. It's going to be a brick facade. It's going to be a metal roof. It's going to have a lot of environmental savings with cost of oil or gas. We're going with gas and lighting. So we're going to be having a savings all around within our maintenance end of the project.
Okay, I was, just to follow up, I was trying just to get a number of when I see the town is going to cover the taking care of the exterior and interior. I was trying to get a number because we're doing that for FIT. So that's all.
I don't have one.
Okay.
I don't have one.
Okay.
An answer for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative McAleese.
Chris McAleese, District 5. I'm in favor of this project. I think it's a great design, and I really just have one question that I raised at committee, and maybe Jerry can give information. It was brought up that because of the changes in the FEMA flood map, the starting elevation would have to raise 3 feet, the first floor plan, and that was going to be looked at and to determine if that affected anything else on the plan. I was wondering if that's been done yet, or if there is any effect at all.
Jerry, do you want to address it, or? Okay. Okay.
Good evening. Jerome Kerner. The FEMA information was obtained from Annette Jacobson quite some time ago and has been incorporated in the design right from the inception, that the building is going to be raised on a plinth, approximately elevation 12, I believe, currently at elevation 9. 12 rather, was the minimum set by the new FEMA coastal region estimates. And all walkways leading to the building have also been designed to be ADA compliant, so there's really no other impact.
I think it was, okay, I think it was unclear that night. I thought you said that night that you still had to make that 3-foot adjustment, but that was already incorporated
Yes,
into what we
yes,
saw.
yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none. Any discussion or comments from the public? Hearing none. We'll now vote on item number 11. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolved that the attached lease for 20 years with Fairfield Indoor Tennis Incorporated be to rebuild the Beanery and Tennis Center be and hereby is approved. Voice vote. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is number 12, to consider and act upon any other matters presented to said meeting which may be properly acted upon under the rules of the representative town meeting. Yes. Board of Education member Piacono.
Hi, Pamela Iacono, Vice Chairman of the Board of Education. I just wanted to inform the body that the Board of Education sent out last week copies of the Prismatic audit, the MGT audit, as well as DVD discs for you all to view the presentations. And if anybody didn't get a copy of that, can you just notify the Board of Education? Our email is boe.members@fairfield.k12.ct.us. Thanks.
I learn each time. Okay. Just real quick, a reminder that next month's meeting will be on February 28th here at Osborne Hill for the year, and also, importantly, important to note that committee meetings will be held on February 14 and 16, a week earlier due to the winter break. So, please put that on your calendar. Thank you all for your attention. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Representative Parker. A second. Representative Bateson. Meeting is now adjourned. So I set a precedent, huh? So what, I can't...